recording is in progress now. Right
It's in
now.
progress. It is. I can't stand that new feature. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's intimidating. That lady's voice intimidates me.
Yeah. It like makes you all nervous before you start recording. We don't want to like mess up and say anything dumb. Because I don't ever say anything dumb.
You just said something dumb. I'm intimidated because her voice is deeper than yours. So I'm like, oh, I'm just not used to that. And it intimidates me.
Good to see you.
What are we here to talk about tonight?
Well, friend? we're talking to Erin, and we were just talking about this beforehand. She's technically, I guess, my sister-in-law's second sister-in-law, once removed sister-in-law, something or other.
The dumbest podcast host I know, because she's just your sister-in-law, man.
Yeah, I guess.
Not I guess. Like, we spent 10 minutes talking about this the other day. Like, I don't know if she's my, and I'm like, dude, she's your sister-in-law.
She's my wife's brother's wife.
Yeah. So your brother-in-law's wife, your sister-in-law.
Okay. Cool.
There we go.
Hi, Erin. How are you, sister-in-law?
Erin, I'm sorry that you have to anything in-law, legal, or sister related to Stuart. I'm sorry that you have to be that person.
It's good most of the time.
Most of the time. Hey, she's coming out. You guys are coming out to stay with us in like 2 weeks, and they're going to go to Red Rocks for a concert.
Next Saturday.
Yeah. So be careful, Erin.
Hopefully, though, I keep monitoring the Red Rocks website because they're rolling out cancellations at like every day.
Oh man.
Well, is it weather or what?
COVID.
COVID. That whole COVID thing. Remember that thing going on?
Yep.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. I got a good dad fail story that just happened like literally like 30 minutes ago.
Okay.
So you know how like when David, I know you've experienced this when you're at work all day long playing Navy and you come home and like you immediately walk in the door and you see your wife and you can just tell that like it's not going well today, right? Like haven't had a good day with the kids.
Every day.
Every day.
Describing. What you're describing is every day. Yeah.
Every day, like, you know, nothing, like dinner hadn't even started, you know, everything like that. So I get in, start cooking dinner, and my son's breaking down. He's hungry. He wants food. He wants a snack. And he wants a snack like right before dinner. I'm like, no, you're not gonna have a snack. We're gonna have dinner. We're gonna have spaghetti. And I was like, you can have meatballs and spaghetti in 30 minutes. He's like, I want a snack, and start, you know, freaking out, breaking out, kicking legs on the ground, throwing a tantrum. I was like, you can have a knuckle sandwich. You want a knuckle sandwich? and in his like, you know, raging, crying, breaking down moment, he's like, that's not a snack. I was like, what is it? He's like, that's a punch in the face.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
it would even be better if he was so hungry, if he was like, yeah, I'll take it.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Well, I started laughing more, which also made him not very happy. And I said, do you want a nothing sandwich? How about a nothing sandwich? You can have nothing for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So dinner was fun. It was a good time.
That's good, man.
Wait, because today was the first day of school, right?
Today was the first day of school for Collins. He didn't start yet. He starts Monday, but I think there was like a second, third order effect, you know, down to him.
Lots going on.
Lots going on.
Change.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, parenting, it's fun.
Knuckle sandwich. I like that.
You like that?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I do like that.
Well, we're going to talk about some parenting tonight. You know, it's probably a little bit heavy of a topic. It can be, but I think it's also a super positive topic that we can talk about. It's definitely on David and my minds. I actually was visiting Texas and hanging out with Erin and Jason, and we went to a fundraising event for DCAC where Erin works, and it you know, just it opened my eyes a little bit more to like, you know, what DCAC is all about, and Erin, I'll let you kind of take over and explain it. But yeah, I think this is just a really good discussion topic to have. A lot of our listeners are parents, and so yeah, we just kind of want to bring awareness to this. So Erin, if you could just give us a little background about, you know, who you are and who you work for, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. As Stu mentioned, my name is Erin. I am Stu's sister-in-law. I've worked at DCAC, which stands for the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center, for almost 15 years. I started there many years ago as the office manager. Nice. And stuck with it. I love DCAC. My title has changed through the years, and last June I was promoted to Chief Operations Officer.
That's awesome.
I wouldn't work anywhere else. It really speaks to a passion that I've always had to help people, and especially kids. I mean, as far back as I can remember, that's been something that really spoke to me. So I kind of lucked into that job. I didn't even really know a lot about the Advocacy Center at first when I applied for it. But once you're there, I mean, the hooks are in, and it's hard to leave. So I'll just talk a little bit about advocacy centers in general.
Yeah.
Because the model for advocacy centers really is the same, regardless of where they are. And so right now there are about 900 advocacy centers in the United States and abroad. There's representation in all 50 states, but they look different. So in terms of size, DCAC, where we are in Dallas, I think we're now officially the second largest advocacy center, both in physical size, staff size, and service statistics. But the model, like I said, is the same. So we practice what's called an Mdt Approach, and that stands for multidisciplinary team. And so housed inside an advocacy center are not just advocacy center staff members, but there are representatives from law enforcement. So like at DCAC, that's the child abuse unit from the Dallas Police Department. And there is some type of child protective service. You know, it's called many different things depending on the state, but in Texas, it's Child Protective Services. And there are 7 Child Protective Service units that work inside DCAC. There's also typically someone from the prosecutor's office. And in some advocacy centers, there is also a clinic. There's sometimes a medical component inside the advocacy center, because sometimes when children need advocacy center services, they also need a very specific type of medical exam. And so some advocacy centers perform those on site and others do not. We do not. We partner with the children's hospitals here in Dallas, and those types of services are performed there. So, you know, kids come to the advocacy center in 2 ways. They're referred either through CPS or law enforcement. Parents may not just call and request an appointment. We do have to go through those channels. And so teachers are the largest professional body in terms of reporters. And so that's kind of had its own dynamic, you know, both during the lockdown and now as kids are going back to school. So, you know, we saw a dramatic dip in services when kids were at home and doing online school when they didn't have access to teachers. And now services are definitely on the upswing. You know, teachers, they're so important in the process. You know, they spend more time with our kids sometimes than we do. And they see the warning signs. They very quickly, you know, figure out what's normal for a kiddo or what isn't normal, and can identify, you know, this little one hasn't changed clothes in 5 days, or this one never has lunch, or you know, this one has a black eye, or just a variety of things. And so teachers, they are mandatory reporters, but I mean, they're the greatest resource in terms of reports of child abuse. So, and kids love teachers. I mean, if we all think back, we all have like a teacher that we remember who kind of changed our lives. And so kids really, they trust teachers, and they'll tell teachers a lot of things that they won't tell other people. And so, you know, a variety of things happen once a kiddo is referred to an advocacy center. The first step is typically something called a forensic interview. It's a child-friendly interview, and it's child-friendly based on the model. So the child is interviewed in one room by a forensic interviewer, and on the other side of the wall, there's an observation room where someone from each of those disciplines that I was describing sits and watches the interview at the same time. And so the idea, and the interview is also recorded for court purposes later. But you know, the idea is that the kid tells their story one time while they're there, in theory. Certainly sometimes there are additional questions, and sometimes they do go to court and they have to testify and tell it again. But while they're at the Advocacy Center, they tell it once. And that's exactly how Advocacy Centers came to be formed. Prior to that, if a kiddo made an outcry of abuse, they would tell it to the teacher. The teacher might report to CPS. CPS worker may come to the school or go to the child's house. The kiddo tells it again. Someone calls 911, they tell it again, and on and on and on. And so that's A, extremely traumatizing, and B, really opens the door for even small details to change. And consistency in telling the story is what's especially critical, especially when it comes to the prosecution side of things. Those little inconsistencies can become problematic. They're not wise. It's just hard to retell something, in exact detail over and over again, especially for a child. So that's what the Advocacy Center was born out of. And DCAC opened in 1991. So we're in our 30th year there. And when we opened, we had 11 employees, and today we have 108.
Wow.
So it's grown substantially. Yeah.
That's awesome. And DCAC itself is a nonprofit organization, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay.
All advocacy centers are. And so, we receive, a variety of private funding, individual funding. We do receive government funds. Lots of family foundations support organizations like DCAC. And then, of course, we do have fundraisers, specifically to raise money.
Yeah. And what's the typical ages, and is there like an age out period? Like, is this focused on, younger children, or what's the typical range?
That's a good question. I actually should have mentioned that at first. So the average client, in fact, just today before we got on, I was like, let me refamiliarize myself. So the National Children's Alliance kind of is the overarching governing body for advocacy centers. And so they reported the most recent stats for 2020. The age category with the highest number of children is age 7 to 12. And so like at DCAC, our average age client is almost always year over year, like 8, 9 years old, primarily female. We do also have male victims of abuse, certainly, that come to DCAC. And so we serve children, from birth to 18 years of age, but we also provide services to any adults who may require some additional support based on a variety of things. So if there are any like developmental issues that might make it difficult for them to interact in an adult setting, they can be interviewed at a place like the Advocacy Center. And so, the warning for anyone who's listening, if kids are listening, might be time to think it through. The primary reason children come to an Advocacy Center are allegations of sexual abuse. We do serve children who have been physically abused, but those cases they're extremely severe cases of physical abuse. Advocacy centers aren't, hey, I saw my neighbor spank their kid in the front yard. That's not what it is. These kiddos have suffered, extreme abuse. And then we also provide services to children who witness violent crimes. And those violent crimes typically have to meet felony level requirements. And so we do witness interviews. The child has been witness to the abuse of a sibling. The child has been witness to the homicide of a parent or of a sibling. And so we do provide interview services for that.
I want to go back just a second to the start of why you even chose to to work at a place like this. What's kind of like your purpose and what's your why behind it all? I mean, I know you're a mom yourself. Is that why? I mean, what made you decide to go work at an advocacy center?
I mean, it sounds really simple. It's the kids. I mean, kids are they're so vulnerable. They and in the hands of the wrong people. I mean, the kids are just hurt in so many ways, in so many terrible ways, and sadly, most often by family members. And so it's that part, especially, that I think just really breaks my heart. I mean, like you said, Stu, I'm a mom. We're all parents on here. I mean, we can't even fathom, like, you feel bad, like when Wells wanted a snack earlier and you're like, no, and he's crying. I mean, that makes you feel sad,
Right.
and so just this desire, just a belief that, God, kids, they deserve to be safe and they deserve a chance, and when they experience and encounter this type of trauma, it can change it does change the trajectory of their lives. Children who have suffered abuse, are, I mean, there are statistics out there that show that they're higher rates for suicidal ideation later in life. There are higher instances of substance abuse. And so early intervention is critical. And I mean, that's just it. Like, they can't protect themselves. And so to be, even though I don't provide, direct services to children, just to be in that world, it's really work. When you leave every day, you have a feeling of like, we did help, we've done something good, we have changed these kids' lives, and that's really what it's about. I mean, the kids are just so, they're just so helpless. I mean, and so it just really speaks to my heart, just keeping them safe. And so that's why I mean, very early on, God, when I was in school, y'all, I used to be the person, like, kids would tell me something was happening to them, and I would be like, come with me. And like, I remember getting like a bar stool one time and crawling up. I had to get the phone book out of a closet. And I was like, I know there's a phone number for like child abuse. And so, I mean, like, I was always the person that was like, my mom will help you, or my grandma will help you, or come to my house and be safe. And so even then, I mean, I just had a sense that, that was something that people should help with.
Yeah, not that's crazy. It's like you're born for it. I'm kind of curious too on what's the scale, like what's the, what are the numbers of, kids that that either need at, well, I guess, and I'm sure the numbers are a bit skewed because these are only the ones that you know about, right?
Mhm.
But is it like, is there some statistic like, 25% of children, or something like that could just help us kind of understand the scale of this issue?
Those statistics, some will tell you 1 in 6 children or 1 in 8 children. That's hard to quantify and qualify, sometimes, kind of like you said. Just to kind of put it in a scale, DCAC last year, in our last fiscal year, we served about 8,000 clients.
Wow.
NCA reported total children served by all advocacy centers last year at about 340,000. And so that is, that's a lot of kids
Yeah.
served through NCA. And so, like I said, though, DCAC is huge. And so we do provide, and we serve Dallas County, so that's another part of it. Advocacy centers are typically county or community specific. And so Dallas County is vast, it's the city of Dallas and 27 other cities. And so, it's a huge population that we serve. And it's hard to say how many, instances of abuse aren't reported. We have an entire team whose job it is to read CPS intake reports almost around the clock and try to decipher what does rise to the level of advocacy center services and what does not. And it is incredibly daunting. I mean, they read thousands and thousands and thousands of CPS reports every month, just to try to, because you're going through the, hey, I saw my neighbor spank their kid, to, hey, I think my neighbor has their kid chained up in a doghouse outside. I mean, it's stuff like that. So reading those reports, that's fairly new to advocacy centers. That was an initiative by the governor's office a couple of years ago to bring that report reading and report screening in-house to try to, our mantra is kind of no child falls through the cracks. And so to try to serve that purpose, that's why those teams were formed inside advocacy centers to start helping read those reports. I mean, CPS workers are so strained and overworked as it is right now that, it's a lot. It's a lot for everyone in the field, but CPS workers especially right now.
I'm sorry, CPS, what does that stand for?
In Texas, it stands for Child Protective Services.
Oh,
and
okay,
so that
okay.
type of governing body, exists everywhere and people call it different things.
Right.
And this is, so, we've been supporting a nonprofit called Exodus Road, which fights human trafficking. And, they're going over to, third world countries that are heavily trafficked. And then, they work stateside too, but this is very different in kind of the overarching scheme of things here. You're dealing with kids stateside that are being abused, like primarily from people that they know, right? And I saw this statistic when we were at the fundraiser. I think it was like 92% of children know like their abuser.
Yes.
So it's like a family member, a friend, like, and
that's right. It's
that's crazy to me.
That's true. And that is true. And that's one of the barriers, also is that it is so hard for people to fathom that it is in fact the people who are closest to your children who are most likely to be, they're perpetrators if something bad happens. And that's part of the process, in terms of people who have bad intentions and want to do terrible things to children. They get in with the family and they come to the family cookouts and they coach the soccer teams and host the pool parties and teach the Sunday school classes. And, bad guys, that's what I used to tell my kids, bad guys don't run around with bad guy hats on.
Yeah.
And that's what's hardest for people to fathom. And certainly, there's this idea of stranger danger, and we talk to our kids about that. And that is certainly something to be aware of. But I mean, the real danger is and are the people that, the people in your inner circle. Not that, not to say that on every block there's a bad guy, but, the grooming often starts with the parents, and you think, oh God, not John, we go to John's every Sunday for family dinner. And that makes it harder to believe. And that also makes it harder for the kiddos to report because, everybody loves that guy. And
Everybody
so,
loves John.
And so that's what makes it hard. And, DCAC advocacy centers, you mentioned Exodus Road. Advocacy centers are more in the arena now in terms of human trafficking. DCAC has a sex trafficking team and a high-risk youth team that is on the rise. The domestic trafficking of children is on the rise. And so that is something, we do see trafficking victims, and more so lately. We partner with some other agencies, like here in Dallas, there's an agency called Traffic 911 that we partner with, but we do have a trafficking team at DCAC because that is also a need.
Yeah, it's crazy. It reminds me, it's interesting because when I was growing up, the next door neighbor, it was a similar thing. And I just thank God that I was a little too old at the time. And not to say that people are necessarily too old, but as a, for me personally, I was a bit old, but my brother wasn't, and the neighbor kids weren't. And I just thank God that it wasn't our family that was impacted, but it all that, like the neighbors, and it was the next door neighbor, the guy that had all the bikes and the motorcycles and the toys, and his own kids. He had his own kids, and just once things started breaking down, it was very sad. It was crazy. And that dude's in jail, and his kids are all messed up, and the wife is an alcoholic. I think she's in jail too. And it was right next door. And it's just it's crazy. It may, as a parent, you can't always be afraid of everybody, right? But you also you can't walk around with blinders on. You can't walk around naive to think that people aren't, especially in our line of work, right? It's interesting because Stu and I talk about how trusting we are in general, and we've seen some very just the worst side of human nature just in what we do. We see it all the time, and it just doesn't, you don't want to believe that it's true. And it's just a crazy, and then it makes, these centers, the advocacy centers, the existence of them, a necessity. And it's just a crazy, it's crazy.
It is. I mean, your analogy is perfect. I mean, it was literally the guy next door.
But it's the guy next door in an affluent neighborhood. Like it's not just, a certain demographic that this is impacting, right? Like
also super important to say.
Yeah.
People do sometimes make assumptions about certain demographics associated with, child sexual abuse. And we say it like in Dallas, there are reports of child sexual abuse in every residential zip code in Dallas County, from the most affluent to the opposite. And so that's also very hard for people to believe, which, people have said that to me personally. Well, surely not in whatever fill in the blank of little affluent town, or surely not these people. And it's true. And it is very hard to believe. And it's like you said, David, the devastation after something like that comes out and people start to pick it apart and really understand. Stuff like that, by the time it comes to the surface, has typically been going on for years.
Yeah.
Years.
No, it's crazy. And I think there's also this element of how we talk to our kids, and there's certain, Stu and I talk all the time about, hey, we don't want things like finances to be taboo in our household, and we want to talk through and educate our children. But it's this stuff too, right? It's just as serious. It's we've been really big on talking to our kids lately about, we give them small amounts of screen time, and we've let my oldest, my daughter, explore the bounds a little bit more, not a lot, like not she's always lamenting that most of her friends have much more liberties, but and I say, well, I'm not their parent, but that's inconsequential. But we are giving her more, the boundaries are expanding, but like we're constantly saying, hey, if somebody comes up on chat, like, just tell me. It's no, like, I'll never be mad at you. I'll never, if someone is asking a question. And then now we started going into the more mature topics of, she's only 10, but of the why behind it. And like, okay, this is why I want you to tell me, because this is what people do. And I want you guys to be open with us. And so I think even talking to your kids about this stuff, like, even, it can be a family member, and you just, to try and open those lines of communication early, because it's insane how we're able to rationalize that it couldn't happen to us.
That's true. And that's a really good point. We get that question a lot, is when should I start talking to my, kid about this? And it's important when they are little, and you can start those conversations when they're changing into their bathing suits and getting ready to swim. And you can talk about the parts of your body that your bathing suit cover. You can have little tiny conversations about it when they're taking baths, and so the most important thing is to empower your children to tell you if something doesn't feel right, if someone makes them uncomfortable, even if they're a family member, and to give your kids those words, and most of all to let them know that you believe them. If they tell you something is weird, someone is weird, it is. It is. And that's what we tell parents is, all of this, go sit in grandpa's lap and go kiss Aunt Mary. And if you don't sit in their lap, they're going to be mad at you. Or if you don't give her a kiss, she's not going to give you a Christmas present. Like, even that kind of language when they're little can send messages to kids, like how they feel and what they want to do or not do with their bodies isn't important. And so it is important If there's a relative and your kid doesn't want to sit in their lap or doesn't want to give them a kiss on the cheek, they shouldn't have to. And you can step in and say, hey, you know what? How about a high five? How about a fist bump? He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to hug today.
How about a knuckle sandwich?
Yeah,
Knuckle
right.
sandwich. That's right.
Yeah.
Right to their face, grandma.
Right. Well, yes. And so important just to empower your kids and give them those words. And, important even when they're little bitty, y'all, is to use like appropriate language for body parts. I cannot stress the importance of that enough, is they are what they are, and we need to call them what they are, because that language is also very important if, God forbid, they're in a situation where they need to talk about something happening to them. And so that's kind of actually the forensic interview that I mentioned earlier. That's kind of actually one of the first steps in the forensic interview, is talking to the child to gain an understanding of what they call. And there are so many names for all the parts. And so to understand early on, what they're talking about, and if they are using, anatomically correct names for those parts, it makes things much easier and much clearer. And so even when they're little bitty, that's where those conversations in the bathtub and stuff can happen. And so that sometimes is like really hard for parents, is to just use the correct language for the body parts. But it's really important, and just so important, just to constantly say to your kiddos, I believe you, I'm here for you. You can tell me anything. And that's, David, what you're saying, you can tell your daughter, if someone pops up on chat, you want to know. It is important just to empower your kids and to let them know that you believe them and believe in them. And that goes a long way. It's so incredibly heartbreaking when children are at the advocacy center, if the parent or the caregiver, the non-offending parent, the non-offending caregiver, does not believe the child. It adds an additional layer of trauma that, it's heartbreaking. And parents and caregivers choose not to believe for a variety of reasons. And so that's a whole other, separate set of circumstances if we're dealing with a caregiver or a parent who is non-believing when a child makes a disclosure.
Yeah, we've had, obviously, we've had lots of conversations with you about, stories that you've seen. And it's definitely like raised, our awareness, Crystal and my awareness of how to talk to our children. And, just the other day, like Collins was outside playing with our neighbor, and our neighbor like kind of slapped her on the butt, and she was like, that's my body part. Don't touch me there. And I was just like, yes, that's educating your kids to like be able to say that kind of stuff is super important. And for the record, I'm not giving my son actual knuckle sandwiches. I'm not abusing my son who's 3 years old. Okay.
That's right.
That was probably a bad joke to start with.
Too late.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't even think about that until
what
just
was the
now.
timing? Like, what is ridiculous?
God. No,
I'm not abusing my kids. Okay.
Right. No, see, that's so good that she said that about him slapping her on the butt, like just that. Yeah. And it makes the other kid like, oh, whoa.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm dealing with the other side of that, where I have a boy who is smacking rear ends. And I'm like, dude, and I've been telling him, like, you're going to go to jail. So stop.
And that's funny too that you bring that. I have 2 sons, and so people will say that too. How do you talk to boys about this topic? Or because even like as my sons got older, they would say, oh my God, that would never happen to me, or that would never, and so even to break through that, because it's even harder sometimes for boys to report and to make outcries of abuse, for a variety of reasons. And so sometimes boys think that they are invincible and that it could never happen. And so while it is less prevalent than the abuse of little girls, it does happen.
Yeah, no, I think those are all, great points, and obviously not topics that are pleasant, but like you said, I mean, you can't have your head in the sand with this stuff. Like, you have to understand that this, it's out there and it happens, and to be very proactive. And I'm kind of curious, what is the desired end state of an advocacy center from the family and the kid perspective? Like, is it, what is it resolution between, like what is it? I don't, it seems like a hard thing that you'd ever rectify.
Yeah, so restoring hope and providing justice, that's kind of one of our taglines. And so the many facets, different from beginning to end, having the kiddo come in and having the opportunity to tell their story during the forensic interview and have that person believe them, that's step one, is letting them tell their story. Step two is moving towards, hopefully, some type of law enforcement involvement, the bad guy gets arrested. Step three is, and just as important as all the other parts, is the therapy piece. We try to pretty much immediately engage the child victim and any non-offending family members and services right away. Family advocacy services, therapy services. We have groups for caregivers. We have individual therapy because the caregiver has their own set of trauma and things they have to talk about, and then therapy for the child, and so that's something we try to do immediately. And then to try to see the cases through the the judicial system. If they progress, we have a high rate of cases moving through the court system. It takes a while, and sometimes that in and of itself can be problematic. Before COVID, it could take 18 months or more, for a
Wow.
case to go to trial. And so then that's a whole other thing. You have your like initial trauma and then more trauma when a kiddo, does have to go to court. People ask us that all the time. Do the children have to testify? Yes, usually, even when there is the forensic interview. And so that we have a whole program for that in terms of support. There's a kids in court program where we really wrap our arms around them when it's time to get ready to testify. Sometimes they're seeing their perpetrator for the first time in a long time in the courtroom. And so it's hard to prepare children for that. And so really, I mean, the goal is, bad guys don't always go to jail. Sometimes, they don't go to jail for as long as we think they should, but the goal really is to try to change the trajectory of the child's life as much as we can in spite of what has happened, and to try to help them see that they are bigger than the abuse. They are still good people. They still can have children of their own and relationships, and they can still go to college, and because they tell themselves a lot of stories about their worth and their capabilities after they've encountered something like this. And so really, that's it. Yes, we want the bad guy to go to jail always, but we want that kiddo to leave the advocacy center with a sense of hope, and really to help the caregiver too. Like, these caregivers, the non-offending family members feel horrific. I mean, there's so much blame. How did I not know? How did I not see it? This was happening under my roof and I had no idea. And that is true. That happens. And so just to help them heal, and I mean, it really is. It's just about the hope. And these kiddos come in and they're in a really dark place, and their families are in really dark places. And it's so really, I would say that it's just about the hope and helping them. Advocacy center services are free, and they are free for the victim and all the non-offending family members, and they are free forever. We have children who have graduated out of therapy services and have needed to come back. We've had caregivers, who have thought that they were all set and good to go, and they can come back. And so it's just about that ongoing support, and just reassuring them that they haven't done anything wrong. They haven't done anything wrong. They're not to blame, and that things can get better. So that's really it.
And that was heavy on my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So this question was posed to the Exodus Road folks the other night, and I'm gonna pose it to you. Like, how, in a job where you see just like bad stuff happening like every day, like how do you cope with that yourself? Like, how do you handle that to like stay lifted up?
That's a good question. For me, like I said, I don't provide direct services to children there, but certainly I am in the environment and do hear, about a lot of it and see a lot of it. I don't know. I think being in the work also helps us feel hopeful that while there are so many terrible things happening to children, that there is hope. I mean, we work in a place where literally every single person is there to help kids.
Yeah.
And to look at your coworker and know they're there for the right reason, and the people downstairs and the police, the detectives are there for the right reason, and because none of those are fun jobs. None of those are fun jobs. The CPS workers, they're there for the right reasons, and just that everyone's kind of in the fight together, and that when people come to the Advocacy Center, they're having their probably worst day ever, and to be able to interact with them, in some little way, or impact their lives positively. I think that's where my, I don't know, I guess that's what makes me feel good about it, or see the bright spot, is that there is hope, and kids go on to do amazing things. We have a little graduation ceremony when they finish therapy, and sometimes they choose to like read us a letter, or tell us something about their journey, and it's incredible. It's
That's
incredible. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Super cool. Yeah, that strikes me as what it would, the fact that you get them on their worst day, and then you have an opportunity to bring them through hope and healing, or healing and then maybe hope, and then see them flourish. Because it's amazing how resilient these kids can be, and
Yes.
and I think the amazing part of it is you guys are providing a service. You're part of an organization that enables that hope and that freedom, and I think that's awesome, right? I think you guys are angels for just giving that not only those services, but that hope, and then eventually healing, and moving forward from there. So and I'm humbled just to be on with you, and just to know the impact that you guys are making. It's awesome.
That's sweet. Thank you.
No, it's incredible. So yep.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, so this is technically a business podcast, but we really want to ingrain faith, family, and freedom into our discussions. And I think knowing about this stuff and having awareness of it, so as business owners, as parents, as moms and dads, like we can have these conversations with our children, as a part of not just our like financial business legacy, but as a part of just our overarching legacy, right? For education. And so they know what's happening in this world, and so that they know how to handle things that come up, and so they can find their highest and best. And that's what this podcast is all about, is helping people find their highest and best, finding their why, and finding their purpose. And if people aren't doing business for a bigger purpose and a bigger why, then what's it all for? And maybe someone hears this tonight and they're like, I've never even heard of a child advocacy center. And maybe they want to look up the child advocacy center in their local city and go volunteer, or go, give some donation money, or whatever that is. I think like that's the point of all of this.
I agree. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Definitely. And more often than not, I mean, I don't know, people have not heard of advocacy centers like almost ever,
Yeah.
ever. Even here in Dallas, I mean, people say all the time, "What do you do? What? Huh? Is that like?" People confuse us with another organization here called CASA. They do similar work, but not the same work, and so it's shocking. I mean, as big as we are, and as much as we are out in the community, I mean, we're wrapping up this week the actual largest child abuse conference in the world. You know, we hosted, this is our 33rd year, and people come from all 50 states and all over the world, and people still have not heard of DCAC right here in Dallas.
So
And so,
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mean, a lot of our listeners are military veterans. A lot of military leave the service and go right into, police force, FBI, CIA, that kind of stuff, other government entities and jobs. A lot of spouses are teachers, and there's a lot. I think a lot of our listeners could get a lot out of this, and an opportunity for more education is just that conference that you're talking about. That is still going on, right? It's virtual this year, so people can still
it is.
Get on and sign up and get some education on these topics. And for a lot, right, isn't it like considered continuous education for some?
It is, yeah. We're offering like 226 continuing education credits this year. We have about 182 workshops. And so, we partner with a lot of tech companies. Facebook is the platinum sponsor for this event. A lot of tech companies are in the arena with us, and, which is important too. I mean, that's how kids have access primarily to a lot of this stuff. And, Stu, you mentioned the military. Our partnership with the military has actually really grown over the last few years. And that was a hard segment to break into years ago. Even just to allow us to come out and talk, just about, recognizing and reporting in general. And so those doors have really opened, and we kind of, like you said, I mean, we work with police officers who are former military, and bad things happen to kids even on military bases.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, it's really grown over the course of the last few years.
Good. Well, I'll get a link that we can put in the show notes for the conference. And Dave, you got any other incredible questions? I mean, there's
last question.
I'm actually that I can create better than
I'm actually shocked that you've gotten more like that's a good question than I think, like just in this podcast than in all the previous 70 combined. I think you've gotten more.
Erin and I talked a little bit ahead of time.
And I mean, she's family. I mean, you don't know what kind of family she is, but she's family.
TBD.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
No, really, my last question is how can people support?
A variety of ways. I mean, we always tell folks we need time, treasure, and talent. And so we need actual volunteers at the Advocacy Center day in and day out. We need folks in waiting rooms who will wipe down tables and help kids with snacks. We need people who will come and stuff backpacks, hand out Christmas presents, and we need people who will buy $2,500 tables at our fundraising events. And we need folks who have expertise in fields, where we need help. So like lawyers, for example, we have several attorneys on our board, and they will do pro bono work for us, for a variety of reasons. So, I mean, there are so many ways people can support. In fact, someone called me the other day and asked me how to get involved. And he said something about money. And I said, yes, we need check writers, but we don't just need check writers. We need people who will host little community education events in their homes. You get 10 friends over and, buy some pizza and serve some drinks, and you let someone from the Advocacy Center come in and talk to 10 of your friends, and then they go home and talk to their kids. And so there are so many ways. And like I mentioned, there are lots of advocacy centers, 17 advocacy centers in Colorado. So they're everywhere. And so people can get involved locally, nationally, the needs are the same, I would guess, pretty much at every advocacy center.
And it's interesting, and you've told me this before, when we've talked, like the easy thing to do to support a cause like this is just to write a check. Like
Mhm.
that's the easy thing to do,
Mhm.
right? The hard thing is to actually like do this other stuff, like actually
Mhm.
show up and
Yes.
talk to kids, or stuff
Mhm.
backpacks, or create a little like meetup, like
Mhm.
because I mean it's heavy, right? Like it's
It
hard to
is.
talk about, and like I'm like on the verge of crying thinking about it with like right now, right? Like it's hard and heavy to talk about, and the easy thing is to write a check, but
Yep.
you
And
know
people tell us that, oh, people don't want to talk about that at dinner,
yeah.
or we don't want to have people over and talk about that, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, the problem is you definitely don't want to be talking about it after it happens either, right?
And that's what we tell people. Like,
Yeah.
get in front, to the best of your ability, and all the conversations in the world, sometimes can't stop a bad guy who's determined to be a bad guy, but
Yeah.
it helps. And you instill in your kids, is, I used to always tell my kids, like a funny tummy. If it feels weird, it is weird. And if you just tell them that from the beginning, if something doesn't make you feel right, that's true, for whatever reason. And their reasons don't have to be the same as yours. And it's so important for parents to hear that and take it into their homes and practice it. It does save kids.
Yeah. That's
And
great.
so, but yes, like you said, I mean, we need like boots on the ground, in the trenches, help, join a board, join an advisory council. There are subcommittees of our board where we need help. We need people who, are great in marketing. We need people who have fundraising experience, who can, because our fundraising team is this big, people who feel comfortable, asking other people for money. So, we need folks who have connections to clothing and shoe companies. And so, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been good. I know it's kind of a serious conversation, but I think it's important, and I'm really glad you came on to talk about it, and hopefully we
Definitely.
can kind of get some awareness out on it, because I mean, yeah, like I didn't know what child advocacy centers were, and this
Mm-hmm.
is good
It
stuff.
could be somebody's passion that's listening, right? It could be
Yeah.
somebody could be, they just don't even know that they exist, and it could be something they're passionate about and looking for a way to. So, I know sometimes we talk about I mean, I think we talk about a lot of meaningful things, and sometimes their meaningful things are heavy,
Mm-hmm.
even the webinar last week it's heavy topics, but heavy topics we shouldn't be afraid of, because those are oftentimes the most important, and you don't. And I argue they're always the most important, right? And I would rather have this conversation, and maybe one person becomes a volunteer, and one person has a conversation with their kid that gets them out of an issue, than that would be the most meaningful thing that we'll never even know happens necessarily. But
That's right.
I think it's hugely important. So thank you for
Absolutely.
taking the time to join a couple knuckleheads and talk heavy topics, because it's
One
important.
knucklehead.
Well, one knucklehead and one knuckle sandwich, apparently.
Right.
But
That's a
actually,
good one.
ironically, the knucklehead and the knuckle sandwich are the same person. But
Yeah.
that being said, just again, this is something that, just do a quick Google search and figure out where these things are in your particular part of the world. We have service members all over the world. And if this is something you're passionate about, get after it, because I think this
That's
is
right.
hugely important.
Thank
Aaron,
you, guys.
what's I mean, if people wanted to just reach out to you and ask more questions, like is there
Sure.
a good way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give my email address here. It's Banister, Banister @dcac.org. And all of our staff members are also on our website, including me.
Okay.
So quick Google search and they can
Awesome.
find me.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, great to see you. Thanks for jumping on. I'll see you
Absolutely.
in a couple weeks here in
That's right.
Colorado. And yeah, I hope, guys and gals, I mean, if this struck a nerve, like, hey, look into it, do some more
Yes.
research, reach out to Erin, see what advocacy center is close to you, and maybe this can be your bigger purpose.
That's right.
Share this, tell somebody about this, give it a screenshot, post it on social media, give David 5 stars, Erin definitely 5 stars, maybe me 5 stars too.
Definitely.
Wow, it's a
Thank
change
you.
of heart for you.
Hey,
Wow,
man,
very, very, very big of you, Stu.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I love you
No.
too, buddy.
Yeah, love you, man.
All right. Most importantly, go fill your storehouse.
Make it a great day, friends.
I got
Thanks, Erin.